Firstly, I would like to respond to some very interesting points raised by Piotr Kisel, and I think we could think and talk about this a bit more. I mean, you raised this question of regulation and the need of stability of regulation, and I think this is really a very, very interesting point here. I was at some point doing a research project where we asked energy intensive companies how they would imagine a climate policy to which they could relate and to which they could kind of contribute. And to our great surprise, they almost unanimously told us that they would prefer a climate tax. Now, raised in Poland, where taxation and business are not necessarily things that you associate with each other, I was really surprised by this, gobsmacked really. But they said, well, actually, no, a climate tax is something you can work with. It's something we can put in our longer term strategies and something that we can adjust to and something that we can build our investment visions on. So this is something that we actually need. You know, we want to go in a certain direction, but we just have to know in advance which direction we're supposed to go in. And I'd like to come back to one thing that was really not so often mentioned today, which is the European Green Deal. Which also has a slightly different American equivalent in the form of the Green New Deal, raised by the Democrats, or at least some among the Democrats. The European version is very much about creating not just, or like a double-edged sword there. On the one hand, you have a long holistic strategy for making Europe more sustainable, where you're sending a strong signal to all the sectors of the industry that this is the way we're going, and basically you are asked to contribute and you are asked to adjust. The other thing about the European Green Deal is also that it's supposed to be something of a normative vision. Now, we generally tend to, especially if we're discussing things like liberalism, we tend to think of the European Union as a normative power. But we should not forget that Europe is very much an economic and a regulatory power as well. Now, it's the second or third largest economy if you take all the EU countries together, after China and the US. But very importantly, if you look at manufactured goods trade, so imports and exports, it's still the largest market for manufactured goods in the world. So whatever the European Union does in terms of its regulation, it's influencing everyone in the world because basically everyone is Europe's trade partner. I mean, apart from North Korea. Or even there, I mean, if you've seen the latest documentary. So the fascinating thing about the Green New Deal or European Green Deal is that it might create something that we can call a climate club. So project European power to regulate outside its borders. And this is a really interesting vision because it also raises a lot of questions which are beyond kind of the realm of economics. Basically, the idea there is that Europe creates a certain set of internal regulations, but if you want to have access to this largest market in the world, you also have to adjust your regulation to those. Otherwise, you're going to be faced with border adjustment payments, which are going to be something of a penalty for not being part of the club. And this is really a tremendous change if that is ever managed to be put through. However, this doesn't really address the tension between authoritarianism and liberalism that we've been discussing, because China can very well adjust European climate regulations without doing anything on the political and human rights dimensions. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing, responding more to what Karl Berger hinted at, we've been growing used to thinking, that there's a wave of populism, something that is kind of moving across the world, especially Central Eastern Europe, US, Brazil. Yeah, I just see that the Traf has to leave. So if you would like to make some final comment now, I will give you the floor. If not, I'll just continue.
I just apologize that I have to leave. I have to run to another meeting. So thanks a lot, and I would like very much to stay in touch and to continue our conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, and also thanks to Maciej Zakrotsky, who also has to leave. Yes, so returning to this, we've been thinking about the populist wave. However, what we tend to omit is that there's also another wave which has been sweeping, particularly Europe. And this is actually this green liberal wave, which is not a myth at all. If you look at the electoral results of green political parties and what we might call social liberal parties, so kind of the centrist parties, who have now reclaimed a lot of the environmental agenda from the Greens. And if you add the two together, they usually outpace right-wing populists, often by a factor of 2 or 3. And if you want evidence of this, well, look at the last important climate policy vote in the European Parliament at the beginning of October. We had this vote on increased emissions reductions target, 60%. And this was passed, well, to a large extent by the Green political faction and by Renew, which is the liberal political faction, where some members, like the Czech ANO movement, which is not really a liberal party in the conventional sense of the term anyway, they have dissented from the Renew line, but there is a visible alliance of those green and liberal forces. So I do agree that we can talk about what liberals can do only if they are in power, but we should not underestimate the power of this green liberal coalition and the power that is already building in many national parliaments and governments. Here in Norway, where I'm based, the traditional agrarian liberal party, if you can believe that, Venstre, is usually winning all the comparative assessments of who is the most environmentally friendly or most environmentally ambitious political party, and it's outpacing the Greens. So it's a political fact. It's not a fantasy and not something of a political utopia, actually.